Welcome, everybody. Welcome to From the Roots to the Branch. And this is personal stories from our beloved presenters of the past and of the present as well. But today we're very lucky and very happy to introduce Andy Bettis, one of the he's up above me or at the side of me. And hi, Andy, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well, Brent.
Lovely to have you here. Um, this is you're the first of these interviews where we just reach out to people and try and get their story, their what sacred dance means to them, and get a little bit of historical stuff for the younger generation coming through. So, Andy, we'll just get started with the questions. I've had a chat with you before, and I've heard so many things in the circle here in Findhorn about you. Your name comes up constantly. And this is a good thing because it's in reference to the brilliant, I would say, creative dances that you brought to Findhorn, and also the energy you brought at the time. I get a sense that there was a great energy at that time, and you had great energy and passion for sacred dance. This is what comes through for me. And so it's great to at last have you here. And I get to ask my questions of you. So I just want to say one thing before we get started, though. You have a fantastic online presence with your wonderful website, which I know a lot of people reference back to. And there's many other little things that we'll maybe talk about throughout the interview. But let's get to know you, Andy. So I'm going to say the first question because every interview we're going to be saying the same questions to everyone. Could you provide us with some insight into your background? Where do you hail from? And what factors of experience have shaped your journey thus far?
Okay. I was born at an early age of mixed parents, as they say. I grew up in Essex in the southeast of England. Went to university in that area, moved around. So had a fairly 60s, 70s youth and upbringing. I started when I went to university, I got into various sort of alternative uh, areas, mostly in sort of philosophy and things like that, but also politics and stuff. From there, that led on to an interest in mysticism, and from there, I was introduced to somebody mentioned Findhorn, so that's how I came to the Findhorn Foundation. So I came up to the foundation in 1986, I think, somewhere like that. Did the experience week, discovered sacred dance. I'd never heard of it before then. Really loved it. And then came back home, and the friend who'd recommended I go up to Findhorn said, I found a local sacred dance group. And it just went on from there. It was something I fell into very easily. Yeah.
I always love these stories of the very spark at this that sparks this musical and dancing journey. So I'll go on to the question number two,
Hmm.
which is history. What initially drew you to the practice of sacred circle dance, and what inspired your interest in integrating it into your own life?
Well, it started from, as I say, from Experience Week and coming back, and it became a sort of, an enthusiastic hobby, if you like. A couple of friends I joined up with who went to there, and it sort of over time it became more of an essential. It was like I'd start building my week around, oh, I've got to be free on a Wednesdays because that's sacred dance night and things like this. Um, it built up. I found other groups nearby. Most groups back then weren't meeting weekly. It would be like monthly or two weekly. So you juggle around to get enough of them. And then after a couple of years, I had the opportunity, for various reasons, to go up to do the teacher training at Findhorn. At the time, it was a 3-week training held in midwinter. Um, Quite fairly intensive, but at the same time, a lot of it was just getting into the Findhorn experience. There's something about staying longer than a week. You get a chance to soak into the thing. And I think after that, it sort of became clear that this was an important aspect of life for me. It wasn't my only sort of spiritual pursuit, but it became a fairly major one. And so not only did I go to groups of that, but that's when I started leading my own groups. Partly because it was nice to have more dancing, and if I was doing it, I could always do my favorites, more or less. Um, but also as a way of having it regularly, having a regular dose of this, it became, if it became my church, if you like.
I totally understand that perspective. Having it as almost a practice that you embody type thing.
Mm.
Yeah, and you had many groups. You say, did you have them in near Findhorn or in England or?
No, this is at the time I was still living. Initially, I was living in Reading when I went up there. I went to a couple of groups near there, and then I moved to London and went to a couple of groups there. Still continued going to one of the groups in Berkshire, which was a bit of a drive, but it was something I loved doing. And then, yes, ran a lot of groups at the time in London would start and stop. Somebody would start it and then they wouldn't be able to maintain rental of a church hall or something like this, or they couldn't get enough of a group. So they came and went. So it was a case of, picking around those really.
Uh, and Andy, was there any names at that time that you can remember that you danced with then? Was there anybody we know now? This.
Well, I suppose the initial big influence on me was Anna Barton, who ran the 3-week course at Findhorn. Hannah Albrecht was the co-leader, and it was a nice contrast between the two of those. Unfortunately, thinking around in London, I danced with Stefan Friedman
Stephen Freeman, yeah, yeah.
quite often. Yeah, he was the king of running a million groups and having people doing things and that. So, and that was always very good. Um, but apart from that, I'm afraid my memory gets a bit vague for names. I shall do some research and get back to you on that.
Well, Stephen Friedman's still the king of that.
Yeah.
He's still doing this. So we'll go on to the next question. Thank you, Andy. So when you got into sacred circle dance, where did you first encounter it, and how did that environment or community shape your understanding and appreciation of it? Could you share a pivotal moment or experience that solidified your commitment to the dance and the practice? What was that initial? Like, was it meditation? Was it healing?
It was it was I think it was the sense of movement meditation, and this goes back to my first ever at the experience week. I'd looked at the program and thought, sacred dance, that sounds terrible. I had visions of like Gregorian chants while plodding around in a circle or something like that. So to find that I could do it and that I enjoyed it. And it had that sense of, it had an aspect of meditation to it, that it was something you focused on like internally, but it also drew you into part of the group. It was a bit like, I suppose that the nearest thing I'd say is being in Quaker meeting when you're in a group of people who have got a set purpose, but obviously it's much more static. So having the moving aspect just brought it to life for me. I'd done a little bit of moving meditation work. I'd done some Sufi stuff in my early years, but this was different. I think that it was that thing of, it wasn't just a group of individuals doing something at the same time in a circle. It was a group moving together. And I think that was the thing that had the real impact on me, that
Mhm.
I could feel that we were part of a group, but it wasn't totally regimented. Everybody was still an individual within that, but moving together. So I think that was probably the thing that really influenced me the most.
And did you, at that time, did you ever dance with Bernard at all? You came after him, did you?
I had one session. Bernard was teaching at Findhorn. I can't remember the date, but it was meant to be a big let's bring all the branches together. At the time, the sort of the Glastonbury movement had gone off in a different way, and all the teachers had been invited up to Findhorn. And by pure coincidence, I was visiting Findhorn at the same time. And somebody said, "Oh, there's an event on down on the bay." Went down there and this huge group of people dancing around a bonfire. And I didn't realize at the time, but Bernard was leading it. And there were quite a few people who I've since found out I danced with, but of course just didn't know their names at the time.
I see. I see. This happens sometimes. We don't get a chance, and yeah, I understand that. But what a lovely experience to have experienced at that point, because not many people have experienced even one dancing with Bernard, and we all go on about Bernard, but to have experienced that must have been a delightful thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's go on to the next question. So, when you go into sacred dance, how do you feel about the form? Reflecting on your journey with sacred dance, what aspects of it ignite the most passion within you and why? And when I think of this in respect to you, I think of traditional dance, but I don't know why. But I'll let you answer this.
Okay. Yes, I think again, harking back to a previous answer, it's the interplay between individuals and groups. The fact that you can dance your own way, but you're still part of the group. And my completely personal opinion and experience is that traditional dances have got a bit more leeway that way. They have a sense of there's kind of a set of steps, but there's that they're to quote Pirates of the Caribbean, they're more guidelines than anything else. So there's a lot of freedom in how you do it. And that, as I've investigated that and gone to more, people just dancing in their native countries doing this, there is that balance of you want to show who you are. You're not just doing robotically the steps everybody else, but you're aware that you don't want to do it so much that you disrupt the group.
Yes.
You find that balance of how you're still in the group, but you're still yourself. Um, I think related to that, I really enjoy dancing to live music because I think that adds another element of you need to be aware of them. It's not like the musicians play and the dancers dance to it. It goes both ways. The musicians will change and react to what the dancers are doing, but the dancers also need to react to what the musicians are doing. So I think that sense of interplay is what I find inspiring about
Yeah.
group dancing. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that the broad spectrum within this confined space of the traditional dance. I understand what you're saying, and actually putting that into words. Thank you, because it gives you some food for thought sometimes with this.
There's
Yeah.
an interesting thing that I don't know what it's like now, but 10 years ago, this was a hot topic. It seemed like when people were teaching dances, they were wary of teaching traditional dances because they were seen to be very precise and you could do it wrong.
Ah, I see.
Whereas people were happy to do modern choreographed dances because they seemed to feel there was more freedom. Which, as I got into it, I thought it's actually completely the other way round. A
It
modern
is.
choreographed
Yeah.
dance,
I,
the choreographer knows exactly what they want you to do and it's all laid out. Whereas traditional dance, sometimes you can't even agree on what the steps are. It's something you pick up from the group of how you move with them. So, no.
it's interesting, isn't it, when we all get together as kind of one and move together, how there can be so much diversity in that. Yeah. And actually, I think you're right. Sometimes it changes over to choreographed dances. This is an amazing thing that happens, isn't it? Um, yeah, so let me see. The next thing, so that was about the form and um, have you chased, have you faced any challenges or obstacles on your path within sacred dance? And if so, how have you navigated them?
Uh, I mean, There's a couple of, one is the I think a lot of people share is having to stand up in front of a group of people
Oh
and
yes, yes.
be the focus and have everyone looking at you and be very aware of that. Um, and that is I had done some training on leading groups and things like this, and I've been an amateur musician of all my life, so I've always had that experience of standing on stage and being the center of attention. So that wasn't too much, but it's one of those things that once I'm there and doing it, it's fine. But just before starting the first dance of a session, I am still terrified. It's hard. For some reason, it doesn't sink through into I can just go there and be blasé about it. But I think in a way that's also part of the job. You are in a focal position. There's a lot resting on you, and I think that sort of air of I need to pay attention. This is serious. This is, I can't just fake this, is an important part of being a vocalizer for a group of people.
Yeah,
Uh,
I totally get this. I actually talked to Anna about this a few times because there's this thing, some people have nerves that never go away, and some people it gets better as you go. I've been quite lucky in that respect. It's went a little bit, but I know that some people, it doesn't go away so easily. Yeah, and you're in a difficult position sometimes, it's interesting to hear teachers such as you who've been doing. How many years did you do altogether, Andy? Just before I forget.
about 30 years I was teaching.
Wow,
Yeah,
wow,
long time. Yeah.
it's a long
Um,
time, isn't it? And you've done many festivals as well.
Done
Uh,
a lot of festivals and workshops and taught all around the world.
yeah,
I think
I've got one of your
my,
booklets here. From 2021. I think Katarina Krober gave me this one. And it's fascinating because it's like going into a time machine and seeing all the what people did before. We're so digital now, but there's something I love about getting a book. And even though this is just a small booklet, it's got so many of your good dances that you brought to Findhorn, like Raiko and Bufchansko and stuff like this. I was looking out my little. I've got lots of little things like this from people that I hope to bring to the interviews, just to show them that people are still using these as resources. It's crazy. 2000, that is now 23 years old. This piece of paper, it's crazy. So yeah. So what was I saying after that? So I'll come back to whatever that was, but I just wanted to remind you of this, and we'll go on to the next.
was before we finish, the other another challenge which I
Yes,
found, which is kind of self-imposed, is um, to go. I spent a lot of the time going to predominantly folk dance workshops and folk dance groups, actually more often groups, where I would often be one of the worst dancers. And it was a bit like a deliberate thing because very often I would end up teaching beginners groups. And it's nice to be reminded of what that's like.
yeah, yeah.
That when you're trying to catch up and everything's going a little bit too fast and you can't work out which foot you're on and things like that. So that was, and I would definitely recommend that to anyone who is teaching, is like go to somewhere where you are pushing your limits, especially if it's somebody teaching in a foreign language, which adds another little aspect
Yes,
to it.
I
Um,
totally get that at the moment, Andy, with going to Germany because I don't speak German, but I do the same thing when I go to Scottish country dance because some of the patterns are very uh, they're very extravagant, these patterns. So I totally get that. When I feel like I want to be in that position, that's where I go. So, dear, let's see. Who did you learn from? Can you describe the role of the mentorship or the guidance from others in your sacred dance journey? And is there anyone in particular whom you admire or look up to in this field?
I would say initially Anna Barton by a long way, and part of that was because, yeah, going up to do the 3 week course, that was we were dancing a couple of times each day for essentially 3 weeks. And that's time enough to get guidance in that it's both things generally for the group and for you individually, and to have somebody who can teach you for that period of time for a continuous thing. They can give you very specific things about, oh, I can see you're working on this, but I notice that you speak quietly when you do that, or you shrink in yourself rather than stand, and even to the how you sort of put dances together and things like that. So it was a very, I don't know, it was the perfect opportunity. It was the ideal teaching experience. And so the mentoring worked very well there. Um, my first dance teacher outside Findhorn was a man called David Moat, who was based in Berkshire, I believe, in the Reading. He taught in Reading. And he had a completely different style. He was very, what nowadays we would say is more folk dancey. He was very precise on steps and rhythms and things like this. And it was a nice contrast to come back to that and to have the, no, you need to pay attention to what you're doing. It's not all, if your heart's in the right place. Having your heart in the right place is really important, but having your feet in the right place at the same time is also
Quite
important.
handy for people. Yes,
Yes. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
I've had several folk dance teachers who I've learnt a lot from. Uh, I think Eve Moreau was probably the one I learnt most from. There was also Steve Katansky, uh, and quite a few. Yeah, and one of the things about learning from other people is often it's I found is not so much the long-term mentorship, it's just the little glimpses you get.
Yeah.
Um, There's the Easter gathering, which has been running since almost longer than I have, which is, for people who don't know, it's an annual get together of dance teachers. It's gone through various forms, but generally it's been a place where dance teachers can get together and watch each other teaching and learn things from that. And that was really useful. The number of times I've gone to things, I remember at one situation, and I can't remember his name, which is really annoying, but uh, one of the teachers was the most airy fairy woo woo, it's all fine, this sort of thing. And I just didn't rate him very much as a teacher. It's just like it was all waffle and everything. And he led a
Well,
session and he did 3 dances and he brought the group together with this amazing sense of presence and coming together. And it was a really good opportunity to look and think, I don't know if I could teach this way, but
yeah.
just want to say, no, there are other ways of doing things that work. And it's just important to notice that. Often it's more useful. You can look and think, they did that. That's a useful thing, just taking uh, I think one teacher I went doing a difficult dance, and she actually had recordings that would play for like a minute, the first minute, and fade out. So
Well,
she would teach with that. This was before we had auto stop and things like this,
yes.
controls. And so we'd start teaching, and just when it's getting difficult, the music would fade out, and she could review it and come back to it. And that became a useful technique. So I think yeah, lots of opportunities to learn. I think you can pretty much learn from any other teacher. There's
Yeah.
always something they do that is you think, oh, yeah, I could do that.
And Andy, can you tell us the group, the Easter group that meets once a year? I think I know which one it is, but do you know the name of this group?
It's called the Easter Gathering. It's generally open to dance teachers and advanced dancers, I believe is the standard thing.
Is this
Uh,
the one up in England? I think I know.
it's run in England. It's been all over the shop over the years. It's not got a set group of people. It gets handed on from people to people. The first one I went to was in Sheffield.
Uh,
It's meandered around the north of England. It was in Reading once. I think it was in Street near Glastonbury at one year, and currently I think it's back in the Midlands. It's in Grapevine. That's sort of the
yeah,
information.
yeah, yes. I'll reference the grapevine below for people, and let's move on to the next question. That's lovely, thank you. So that was who did you learn from? So the next question on the list is how do you see the spiritual side of this community? How do you see the intersection between sacred dance and personal transformation or spiritual growth in your own life?
It's, I think on a purely personal level, it's dance for me is a moving meditation. I used to joke when teaching that my aim in life was to find the world's fastest meditation dance. And in fact, that's often the case. I find some dances that seem quite intricate can take you into a different space. It's a bit like your body and your brain get taken up with all this complexity of movement, which leaves your mind free to be in this sort of clear space. So I've always seen it that way. At some level, it is a moving meditation. And at times, I would even say it can be a prayer. You reach the point where you are dancing to dance this dance as well as you possibly can for some greater being's sort of celebration or amusement or whatever. So I've always, I mean, coming from Findhorn, there's a lot more emphasis on that anyway. But I do find it's even amongst the most folky of folk dance teachers, there is this acknowledgement that there's something about dancing, especially in a group, that is somehow devotional. It is, I think it is just acknowledging something bigger than yourself. And that's very much been the way for me.
Yes, I think this is a wonderful question to people because it's interesting that you're saying, and I'm glad you've brought it for the viewers here, is the fact that the folk dance people, some actually talk about this, even though they're not there necessarily for spiritual matters or meditation matters or anything like this. And yeah, it's there. Yet there's something there in the background that they go, this is actually probably why I come, but I don't know why. But yeah, and
Mm.
it's unspeakable, isn't it? Some of it, it's got that essence that you can only touch when you're there if you've touched it. Yeah. So thank you, Andy. It was lovely. Um, so the next question is a little different, uh, uh, but on a spiritual, I suppose, side. So rituals. Are there specific rituals or traditions within sacred dance that resonate deeply with you? And if yes, why do they hold such a significance?
Okay. The simplest ones have always been starting a session with silence. Um, Sometimes I might say a few words, but generally what I like to do, and sometimes it doesn't have to be before anything is done. And a lot of times if I'm teaching, I'll do a very simple dance to bring people together. I really don't like standing in a room saying, "Come on, everybody, come on, we're about to start." Put the music on, let them join in. But always having that moment of stillness at the start, I find just puts people into it and puts people, including me, into a sort of different receptive state. It's sort of an acceptance that we're here for a purpose, and does that. And similarly, at the end of a session, although often at the end I would say a few words. There was one thing that I started doing. It was called a Sufi blessing, but I think that was just a name. And it was just a series of words and gestures about giving thanks in different directions and to the group and beyond the group and then coming back together. And it just formed, it was one of these things of ritual is a good word. It was a thing, it was the same words every time, the same movements, and it was a formal ending and I found it, I mean, it worked nicely on some ethereal level, which is very subjective, but it also gave people a chance to sort of observe where they were at the end of the session. And very often it would be a case of otherwise you get to the last dance and then everybody goes and they're taking care of their belongings and things. And it was this chance to think, oh, I feel different now. There's something different in my mind, my being. Yeah, so that was
So so you blessed each corner. Is that what you were doing? And
it was it was more to do with like the different cardinal directions and then including the group and then including people outside the group
yeah,
and then back and just giving thanks at the end. Unfortunately, it's probably about 10 years since I did it, which is why I'm not going through it.
It's wonderful you've got that memory because obviously something in you that still holds this. And so these experiences are amazing, and it's nice to hear your experience of this.
On a not necessarily, it's something I did. It's not so much dance specific, but very often in a regular group, so a weekly or a bi-weekly group. After the last dance, we would sit in a circle and have a group of angel or blessing cards,
Aye,
and each choose one.
yes,
Um, and it was really it was it was a nice thing because they're all very positive, but it was also a chance for people to unwind a bit. So it could be get to the end and they'd say, "Oh, I've got the blessing of joy" or something like that. And yeah, this happened to me in the week, or this is something I'm working on. So it gave them a chance in this safe space that we created to share. And it's kind of evolved in different groups. Some of them got to you could take blessings for people who weren't in the group.
yeah.
Uh, and then it became your duty to deliver that piece of cardboard. That was how you did it. You couldn't just do a nice gesture. You had to actually do it. And sometimes people would give blessings to people in the group who were going through something and things like that. So that was
Nice, yes.
kind of a nice when you've done a process that's put people into a different state. It's nice to use that and to do this sort of thing. Yeah.
For positive.
Yeah. The other on a specific ritual, which I think we've mentioned before. Um, there's a thing at Findhorn at midwinter of the spiral, and the
Viral.
spiral is laid out, and people walk it as a process of transformation, and it developed this tradition of doing a long spiral dance before the spiral was laid down, and I kind of inherited it. I don't think I initiated it. I think somebody did it before me. But it developed into I found two pieces of music went together that was half an hour, and we did a simple dance for half an hour in a spiral in and out. And it was quite, yeah, I was quite stern about it with the people. I would sort of say, rather than this is all here for everyone like that, it's like, no, we're here to do a job. This is to set the stage for other people's experience. So that's the primary thing. But it was incredibly moving. We would regularly get maybe 100 people, several of whom weren't regular dancers, but to just apart from the music, in silence, just to dance this spiral in and out each time. Yeah, it was very, very powerful. And it felt like that sense of sacred dance, not as just a thing for yourself, but something you're doing for your community in whatever state. So that really did resonate with me.
Your energy must still be here then, Andy, because we still do this, and it's one of my favorite actually things when we do it. We usually now have a drum
Mm.
and maybe one or two dancers round into the spiral, as you say, to set the stage for people doing the spiral. And become really interested in spirals recently because of I've been doing it with Friedel in Germany, but here in Findhorn, it's such a big event. This is still a big event that people love, and if you don't get to go, you get somebody to get your angel. This type of thing from the table. So I guess you'll understand that side of it. Yeah. So I didn't realize you did this. So this is really lovely to hear that you did half an hour sessions. Wow, fantastic. Yeah. So we've got a different question now. So style. Have you explored different styles or cultural variations of sacred dance? And if so, how have they enriched your understanding of this art form? And with this, I guess what we'd like to know as well is what is your favorite type of dancing? Is it like Balkan? Is it Serbian? These kind of things. So.
Okay. Yeah, I from quite on early on, I found myself drawn to the more traditional dances. Although often to the simpler ones over times, rather than there was this a period where everyone was trying to find a dance that had, Hungarian dance with 7 parts and things like this in a different. So I tended to go for the fairly simple ones. Somebody once joked about me. They said the dances that I like, they don't have many steps, but they're all tricky. And it's looking at rhythms and movement within that. And yeah, I suppose the Balkans really. Mostly, I would say Macedonia, Albania, Greek, um, not so much Serbian, Bulgarian. That is my favorite, but I do try and sort of mix it up. I learned quite a few sort of Middle Eastern dances, or Assyrian and Syrian, in fact, things like that. Which there's obviously a correlation between them, a few Turkish ones as well. I think the Balkans they fit more easily into the style of a mixed line of people. So it's not gender separated, it's not a couple's dance, so it's more open, things like that. Although nowadays there's more and more young people dancing in ethnic traditions, and it's become less important. You don't have the rigid gender roles and things like that. You get women jumping in the air doing Greek dances and things like this, and men happy to just shuffle along at the back.
And
Uh,
doing that, and things like this. Yeah.
yeah. So that was it. I tried. I think when I started, you just did whatever dances there were, so it went from all over the place. I still tried to do that. I still tried to have some variety. It's always good to explore these things, but yeah, these simple dances with uneven rhythms are the things that kept pulling me in, and the music. I find Balkan. I mean, I think Albanian music is some of the most marvelous in the world, and things like that. I'm not sure if there's any.
I wondered a little question. Um, I'm always interested in how back then, when you had your cassettes, and probably didn't have as much. We have so much variety now online. I mean, you can get anything now. But back then, it was obviously hard to get music and get the steps. You would have to travel to get these steps and things like this. So I wondered how that was for you, and did that change? Yeah.
Yes, I mean, early on it was like that. It was people would get a little bit defensive about it. So, for example, I think the early Findhorn dance tapes, I think there was like 6 or 7 of them came out, and those you could only get if you went to Findhorn and attended a workshop there. It's like this. And then a group started in the Glastonbury area, research, get collecting, putting music out, and also investigating more music and doing this. And yeah, it slowly expanded. A lot of it was as people came into contact with the folk dance world, they had a lot more resources. For a long time in sacred dance, a dance had one piece of music, and that was the only thing you ever danced it to. So you knew it completely. If you've done it a few times, you knew exactly what happened, and oh, when that voice comes in, that means we're coming up to the middle part and things like this. Um, so as it developed, as more music came in, this was a huge thing for me, and something that made me a big part of my workshops is doing a dance to several different pieces of music. Because I find it just opens it up. It makes it so much more multifaceted. And it's not just fast and slow, it's different emphasis, and it's very sharp, precise, or very wandering with the beat and things like that. Um, yeah, there was a bit of contention, I suppose, as big music became a bit more available, where people were reluctant to pay for it, and I was one of the people who would always be hectoring teachers and saying, "You can't just give music away. Give people the
Yeah.
reference,
Yeah.
buy a copy, and things like this." I think that's changed a lot now because it is just so convenient.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but it is nice, and it's now, in towards the last half of my dancing career, I actually got to meet a lot of these musicians. And in fact, Xenos, the band
Oh
from
yes. Yes, yeah.
not only did they come across to Findhorn and invited Laura and I across to Australia, but they actually would specifically record pieces of music for dance. One of their CDs was all long versions. Every piece was at least 5 minutes long.
Yes,
Uh,
I
and
still have all the I absolutely adore these pieces of music from Xenos because they feel like you know like an organ in a body of you know this kind of thing. So you couldn't function without it, I don't think. You know.
it was also interesting teaching with Xenos, especially in Australia, because Anne, saxophone player, would often teach the dances.
Ah,
And a musician, and they're very immersed in, culture, particularly of Balkans. Um, but it's a different approach having a musician teach to having a dancer teach. They hear different cues and
yeah.
they view it in a different way. So that was another interesting way, another way of looking at things.
So you and Laura were over in Australia with Xenos at some point. That must have been such a big experience for you in your life.
Oh God, yes. In fact, not to go too far into it, but they had invited us to this thing called the Woodford Folk Festival,
Oh wow.
which is it's held between Christmas and New Year in Queensland in Australia,
Okay.
and they were performing there. And they said that we'd invited them to Findhorn, and they talked to the organisers, and they arranged for us to do a couple of workshops. But they also had a big event at the end of the festival where they would invite um, a selection of the performers. I mean, it's a huge, great festival, and have what they called the fire ceremony, and they would do a 2 hour sort of performance of the various musicians and people doing things, and they wanted to do a community dance piece there. So we came across not expecting what would happen and ended up in a field in the burning midsummer of Australia because that's their midsummer, teaching 400 complete beginners um, with microphones and a PA system because you couldn't be heard over that distance.
Of course.
And and not all of the 400 made it to the final performance, but we ended up, with several hundred people dancing around these giant bonfires, watched by, I believe the audience was 10,000. So that was like an absolutely amazing experience. Yeah.
Wow, these experience I can't believe some of the people's when I hear some of the people in the past stories about these kind of things. My you know, I just imagine what the feeling was like surrounding that because it's a very I would think it was the infancy of the sacred dance kind of movement. But yeah, it sounds amazing. And have you, can you highlight any other tours you've done, like in other areas? Did you go anywhere else, like
I mean, yeah,
afield?
I in about 10 years ago, I was invited to Brazil.
You went to
They
Brazil?
had their own dance festival. I was in fact invited as part of Gadjadillo, who were an offshoot of the festival band, who may well still be playing. But so we went to play, and also I was invited to teach. So that had a strange thing as a teacher in that there were, I think it was about 250 attendees, that sort of number. And so the dance spaces weren't big enough to get 250 people dancing to teach. So they split the participants into three groups, and there were three guest teachers, and we taught the same thing to a different group each day. And they were very insistent that we had to teach exactly the same thing so that nobody felt they were missing out in the wrong group. And it's a very strange experience to teach the same workshop three times because in my mind I was thinking, have I said that today or was that yesterday? Have I mentioned this? Yes, it was. But it was interesting because it was a much younger crowd than normal. I think a lot of sacred dance groups tend to be older, and the Brazilians were very, the majority, I would say, were in their 20s, maybe 30s. Very keen, very enthusiastic. And of course, a lot of the time we could do it with live music, which was good.
Your experience with Brazil is it sounds amazing. It must have been amazing at that time. in the infancy over there, because it was very much in its infancy there as well. Um, and I did see you on the banner. I think I seen you on the banner when I was over there just last year, because they have these big banners, and there's a presenter for each one. And I think you were on the first one, if I'm correct. I'm pretty sure that was because Renata said to me, "This is, you know, the band that came from Findhorn." So it must have been you. Yes. So, will we move on to the next question? And the next question is, so we did style, and now we will look at the future. Looking ahead, what are your aspirations or goals within the realm of sacred dance, and how do you envision continuing or cultivating your passion for it in the future? Or I want to add a little bit for you, because we know that you're not doing as many as you used to. Um, but it's more an appreciation of what you have done, because you've done a lot in sacred dance. You were one of the ones, for in my mind, here in Findhorn, who did so much to support it continuing to people like me. And so I guess I'll change this question, which is going to be one of the main questions as well. I'm going to change it to, how would you like to see it being, going in the future in the community, and what things would you like to see happen? What what would your heart like to the community to take in from you? What's your dreams of sacred dance?
I suppose I mean, yes, the things that became more important to me over the time, and which I would say pass on, are dances that are simple enough for beginners to pick up fairly easily, but deep enough that people can find more in them. There's which I find a lot of the traditional Balkan ones are like that. There's not much to learn as regards where your feet go, but there's more and more about how you pick up the rhythm, how you interpret that, how you interact with other people. So that was all, I think, really became my passion. There's always a challenge of like, how do you keep it sharp for people who've been doing it a long time? And you can have dances that have leaders. I would very often drawn to things if it's a large group and you would get up with a line getting stretched. I
Hmm.
would encourage people to say, well, okay, don't suffer, break the line, take responsibility, and then you can guide that line and take it that way. So that sense of, yeah, again, individual empowerment, but then having to respect where the group goes as well. A thing I've seen, I mean, there was always live music in Findhorn, but in I've seen in England as well now, is people having, as well as a regular sacred dance or circle dance session that they would meet with recorded music, they would have intermittent ones where it will be a group of teachers would get together with a group of participants and a scratch band, and so have live music which isn't necessarily hugely polished, but it's an opportunity that you can get a group of people together that you create the whole thing. You're doing the music, you're doing the dancing, you share the teaching, so it's not all focused on one person, and it becomes a community event. And I find that can be very, very moving. You can get people who end up, there was one I went to where there's a couple of very elderly women who would come and they could barely walk, but they were present, and it was like that was part of their community. I think one of them used to make sure the kettle was on for a tea break and things like that.
Very important, Andy.
Very important. It was that sense of everybody has a place in here, and you might take it in turns to be the focus, but you're not the whole focus. This is about the whole community coming together. And I think that's what the future is. There will always be groups for the people who find dance, this is their particular passion and they want to push themselves. And often you do have to find a specialist group where you can go to the limit with these things. But generally, for like data, you really need to keep coming back to this, immersing yourself in your community.
Yeah, yeah. I love that you say the community thing because the sacred dance community is so global, and I do think there's a place for everybody to show what they can do in that respect. And yeah, so thank you for saying this. But we have two little questions. Very simple, and maybe it sounds silly, but no. What is, can you, if you remember your sacred dance career, and what would be your most favorite dance and song? I know it's a hard one, but if you've got one, we would love
I,
to.
I was prepared for this question, so
I
I'm.
thought you might be.
So the one that came to mind was a dance called Samikos Karditsa, which is a fairly simple 12-step Greek dance um, uh, from Crete, I believe, initially. But it's one of those dances that has got a million identities. You can see it all over Greece and beyond. And the music, Papalembrena
Oh yeah.
by Xenos, which, yes, I was visiting them and they were playing this just as a sort of little warm-up thing. And I said, that's amazing. Can you do that? And they ended
It's
up.
an amazing tune, the Papalumbrino, yeah. Xenos, obviously. Yes. But yeah, I can see you dancing this one a lot. I think, is this one that's on YouTube maybe of you dancing? You might,
Quite possibly,
I
yes.
think that's possible, yeah, if I remember rightly. Uh,
Yeah, I'll do a little advert here and say on my website, which is andybettis.com,
yes.
there is a whole dance section. It's got all of my dance notes, and there are a bunch of teaching videos, which are predominantly actually from a Findhorn dance festival. Peter Valance, I taught the advanced dance session that year, and he made a point of videoing me teaching to camera and then doing the first part with the group. So it's a nice way of not trying to just pick up something up from watching a group of people dancing. It is someone teaching to you. So yeah, so those are there.
Yes, I know a lot of people really appreciate your leaving your website up with all the resources. So I will say thank you because it's been helpful to me, definitely. And yeah, we've covered all the questions now. We know your favorite song and dance, and just more now about appreciating what you've done and I know you've done apps in the past and stuff like this for Sacred Dance. I think you were the first to venture down that road. Can you say a little bit about that? Because I know people might not know this about you, but I heard it through the grapevine, not the magazine, just the grapevine.
Yeah, this was one of those. Again, going back in time when I started, all we had was cassettes, and so you would carefully line up the dances that you were going to do, and then somebody would say, "Can we do that again?" And you had to rewind and try and get the start and things like this. And eventually, we would get short cassettes, and just put one track on each side so you could rewind it. And then it moved on to CDs and mini disc and iPads and things like this. Um, and I just was aware that often the problem was finding a system that would play one track and stop. So I've gone through various ways of getting that done. But yeah, being I work in computers, it was a nice opportunity. So I wrote an app that you could import music onto for iPhones and iPods, and it would you could the simple thing was you could choose a dance, it would play it and stop, or it would play a sequence of them, and you could put gaps in between them and things like this. But what was really useful for me as a dance teacher, because I'd often ad lib when I was doing a workshop with piece of music, it would keep track of which pieces of music you'd used.
Ah,
At the
okay.
end, I could do a set of dance notes and also say, and these are the pieces of music I used all the way through. So it's called Teachers DJ Mini, and it's available for iOS devices.
Oh, it's still about. I didn't realize it was still about. Is
I'm
it?
not sure it still is. It got a bit old. I'm not sure I've updated it. If there's enough demand, I'll get it going again. So,
Oh, there's a thing we might see in the future. You never know. We shouldn't say that because they'll want something. No, no. But anyway,
Has to be
uh,
wetted.
Andy, it's been lovely to hear your answers to the questions, and thank you for being the first for being the test victim at this point. And it's just lovely to have your face on the centerpiece page as well, because I think initially when I first started the centerpiece, I said, Andy, can you teach a dance? But you're not an online teacher or anything, and you're not teaching so much now. But I just appreciate you giving us this little bit of historical content for the future generation on this Centrepiece YouTube uh, page. So thank you so much. I really appreciate that, and I wish you love, and I wish you many, many more years of happiness. And thank you for everything you've done for Sacred Dance Community. I can feel your remnants.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Andy.
Okay. Good. Okay.